Check, check. Here we go. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Twilight Network, your place to get all sorts of GMing tips, world building tips, and storytelling and homebrew tips for the Chronicles of Darkness put out by Onyx Path Publishing. Uh, uh, of course, this is where my camera misbehaves. Deactivate, activate. There we go. As always, coming to you from the northern Midlands of Tasmania, from Palawa land, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Rita Sheik, good morning. A little bit of news on the Onyx Path front. Trinity Continuum Aether has hit Kickstarter, and so you can go to Kickstarter at the Onyx Path to take a look at that. It is a Victorian-themed Trinity Continuum story, which is going to be... It looks really cool. The art is fantastic. I may even get it up a little later in the stream. It is a beautiful looking book. Heap of stuff hitting red lines for development. You can take a look at the June roundup if you're curious about any of that. Personally, I'm hanging out for Changeling, the Lost Kith and Kin. It's been so long. I just need a little bit of Kith and Kin, please. All right. So this morning we're continuing with Hunter, and we'll be playing around a little bit with endowments and what they are, how to create them with our little Bellefonte conspiracy. Oh, I am also recovering from COVID, so when I cough, I'm sorry. It is not my intention to um, blow anyone's eardrums out, but I may accidentally do that. Sorry. Yeah, that's what I want. Music up. So, part of what I want to talk about today is the difference between Australian storytelling and the more greater world storytelling, um, and how that can affect a game like Hunter. Hunter, the Vigil, really comes about and really kind of has two modes. You have the old world European mode, where you've got groups like the Malleus Maleficarum that came about during the Middle Ages, or you have groups like the Luciferge that are this grand kind of conspiracy that is protecting people from demons. Or you have the Aegis Kai Duru, which are relic hunters that are sniffing out and trying to discover new and interesting relics. You have that sort of grand historical narrative for the more European styled hunters and the more Asian or African styled hunters. There is this sense of weight behind them, and that weight is history bearing down upon them, making them just that little bit more historically compelling and giving them a sense of place in time. If we look a little bit more towards America, where you have um, groups like VASCU or um, the Chiron group, or although Chiron's a little bit weird, or Task Force Valkyrie, you get this government sort of interference, this government level conspiracy going on where the government knows about the supernatural, but they're doing their best to keep it quiet. But you have this sense of ease of access towards the resources needed to engage with the hunt and to engage with. Let's hope that doesn't. Sweet. And to engage with those on the hunt. You have a storytelling mode where weapons are much easier to get access to, which is why things like why some of the compacts exist really easily in an American setting. In a European setting, you have slightly older compacts, but the things where you can go to Granddad's shed and get the shotgun and be able to defend yourself. So, in this majority world sort of setting, you have a very different style of storytelling going on. However, in terms of storytelling in an Australian context, in a context where this sort of majority world stuff isn't quite the case, where you don't have ease of access to firearms, where you don't have ease of access to weaponry, where you don't have European historical hegemony like you do in Europe, or even a strong history of interaction with other cultures. Because take Tassie, it's the island at the bottom of the world. So you have to figure out, if you're going to tell a story in Australia, how things are going to work. How are your hunters going to get access to weapons? We had Port Arthur about 30 years ago, I think. 1996 maybe. I don't recall fully. And that radically reduced the ease of access that Australians have to firearms. It radically reduces the ease of access to all sorts of weaponry. And so when we're building a conspiracy, we have to factor that in. Does our conspiracy have ease of access to weapons? If so, why? Does our compact have the ability to bypass legal means of getting firearms? If so, how? This comes down in Chronicles of Darkness, where you have the availability system. This can come down to a number of things. This can come down to just straight up increasing the resources necessary to gain a firearm, or it could mean that you engage in several politics roles to get through the um, bureaucratic wall that surrounds um, the access of firearms. Firearms are just one element of this, but they are an important element because when we're looking at um, storytelling, particularly monster hunter storytelling, if you're thinking in a European context, gun guns can be rare, but they are able to be accessed by those who want them. If you're in an American context, they're very easily accessed. In an Australian context, there has to be that barrier. Not out of a um, desire to manipulate the setting, but out of a fidelity to the setting. Um, you also, if you're running a story in Australia, there are differences of perspective when it comes to certain things like um, sorry, I'm just having a mental blank. There are differences in perspective when it comes to government. In the in the very Americanized style of Hunter the Vigil, government plays a big role. They are the crowdfunder. They are the body collector. They are everything. You have things like Task Force Valkyrie. You have things like the Chiron Group. You have things like VASCU, which are government funded and operated agencies. In Australia, you have to decide how you want government to be viewed. Do you want to take the more libertarian style and push back a little bit against government and say, no, 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 no. The Australian government may know, but they don't have hunters. Hunters are an extension of something else. Um, with our Bellefonte conspiracy, hunters are an extension of empire. They're an extension of blackbirding, and they're an extension of um, uh, the desire to um, be left alone, really, to have a fair go, to not be trapped by the rules of government while still obeying and engaging with government where necessary. This means that the Bellefonte conspiracy has to have a very complex relationship with law and order. Do they adhere to law within the setting? Probably a little bit, but then they're more off the side of legal. They're more paramilitary. Are they an extension of the old militias that went through and assaulted Aboriginal people, attacked them? That's a serious question for history in your world. The history that we've given the Bellefonte group is that they are a group who fought back against government experimentation, colonial experimentation, and the sorts of vainglory that makes up a lot of this power within the world. So they're kind of their own thing, doing their best, collecting resources from around. Other things that need to be questioned in your world, if you're running an Australian story, is what is the relationship to bush and relationship to city? Traditionally, in terms of storytelling, you kind of have a masculine feminine dichotomy, or an in group out group dichotomy. What is within the gate, behind the walls of the city, is masculine. What is outside of the cities, in some form, is feminine. Uh, this sort of style is very, very common in old world, in legacy countries, if you like, and very common in the United States. where the wild is still has this sort of feminine energy, but the cities have this masculine energy, this mastery compared to the more relational and ecosystem style. And whilst that does have its validity within Australian storytelling, it's not the case. Australian storytelling is mostly actually focused around this, an inversion of this. The bush is the masculine area. Um, if we look at our Aboriginal people, it was often men who would go out into bush to hunt for meat. It was That was not the domain of women. Similarly, the early settlers, although yes, many of them were men, many of them were bringing civilization, there is a dropping off of the mastery of civilization. And instead, you have things like the man from Snowy River, who is an agent of the bush. You have um, characters like Alexander Pierce, who is a renowned cannibal in Tasmania from colonial period, who demonstrated a mastery of the bush. The wild, the forest, instead of having this feminine edge, has this almost brutal masculine edge and masculine energy. In comparison to that, the home became the center of order and regiment, and that was the place of women. Women became the driving force of cities. Women became the driving force of um, development in these places. Not because they were, the men and women dichotomy, masculine feminine dichotomy, not because they were more ordered naturally, but because in these cities, the work of ensuring that order takes place was handled by women. Yes, men still designed them, but it was women who made them. So when we're looking at Australian storytelling, we have to ask the question, what is the relationship to the bush, to the wild, and what is the relationship to the city? In the case of the Chimera, the Belafonte conspiracy, who is standing against the Chimera cult, we are looking at two institutions. One that carries a very masculine styled energy of the bush, of the wild. The Chimera cult is not a kind institution. They are brutal. They are taking from the land. They are taking of resources. They are fire that burns and renews. They are the force of evolution. This, of course, makes them very uh, complex in how they're going to engage in the world. They're going to harm the world as much as possible to get what they want. They are brutal. They are coercive. In comparison, the Belafonte conspiracy is much more relational. They are standing against something. They are fighting against slavery, human experimentation, and weird science. They are a much more feminine energied body. And what that means in an Australian context needs to be different to that of a legacy world context. This is a group that needs to be able to make mates basically wherever they go. Their first port of call with supernaturals is not to engage in antagonistic relationship, but to engage in a friendly relationship. However, they are fundamentally focused against groups like the Chimera cult and will assault their deviants to make a point. Good morning, kitten. Are there any other points for Australian storytelling that we should make? No. Just check. Yeah, we got 3 people. So this difference between the Chimera cult and in Australian storytelling should come out in kind of the locations of these groups. Like the Chimera cult is based in Longford. It's a small farming town, and it's a town that has had regular floods, has had a history of car racing, and is very has a history of hunting and a culture of hunting, don't they, baby? So we're looking at a location that is very masculine and blokey. It's important to note as well. Um, I forget the name of the documentary, but it's a documentary that looked at the Mojo advertising company. Mojo were an advertising company through the 80s, I think, and they are responsible for a lot of very blokey ads coming out of Australia in the 80s. You have you have things like "Come on Aussie, come on," which was all about Australian masculinity. This very active, this very participatory and blokey men's men sort of um, advertising. Yes, it was. Um, if you ever if you're ever in the market for a good documentary, the documentary on the Mojo Advertising Company is fantastic. I highly recommend it, and it explains a lot of Australian culture. However, in comparison to this, the Bellefonte conspiracy has softer powers. One of their themes is fate and luck. They're about a fair go. They're about fighting against the powers. I and bringing in the down and outs. I did a little work on their status this morning. They're very simple things. An ability to a +2 against the Chimera cult for tracking and tailing and following. Um, the Lucky Charm merit and the and 1 dot in Esoteric Armory. These are preparatory tools. They're there to make a point that the Bellefonte group are about bringing people together, about fighting against those that specifically are working towards damaging the world. Yes, isn't that so, kitten? I'll actually try to get a look at that cat. Look at that baby. This sort of soft storytelling style is something that has to come out in their endowments. Endowments are the tools, supernatural tools of a hunter. They are powerful, often um, they're often tools that are very somewhat situational. So um, I built and you'll be able to see a Hunter the Vigil build in effect with over on the Onyx Path, um, Onyx Podcast or Onyx Pathcast. That's it, Onyx Pathcast, where they're going to go through Hunter. I think this week's podcast drop, and they're going to do some character creation. I did some character creation with Hunter, and I built I think he's a punch focused fire manipulating member of the Luciferge. But for our Bellefonte conspiracy, oh, oh, hello. They play around with the manipulation of luck and fate to bring about outcomes and deaden experimentation effects. So how are we going to build those powers? Thankfully, the very smart people over at Onyx Path. Yes, Cat, I'm actually doing something that's more important than you are. Shocking as that may be. They give us this really good table and series of tables on how to build endowments. So the goal of building an endowment is to always equal 0. Um, so when you have a mechanical effect, it has to have a cost that negates the effect, and there can be backlash, which is something that negatively affects your character after they've activated their endowment. Oh, ouch. So we're going to build a basic one, very basic one. We've probably got time for 2 or 3 actually. So if you're in chat, if you have any ideas on luck-based powers or powers that deaden and negate certain effects, feel free to post basic ideas. Um, so effect. We want an effect that allows us to um, decrease. You can negate one supernatural power. That's the narrative effect. Um, this is equivalent of inflicting a condition. So, um, inflict a condition, and it lasts for a scene. Uh, this these effects are all rated at 1, so that gives us a total effect bonus of 2, which means we have to offset it with a cost of some description. This is going to be pretty simple. This needs to be a resisted action. So when you activate this, the antagonist immediately gets a resistance to this. So if we were to put it into the writing style of an endowment, stretching out with your connection to fate, you curse an opponent to be unable to access their supernatural abilities for a scene. Dice pool. We want to make this manipulation plus manipulation plus what? For skills. Do I have a... No, that's all other stuff. Let's get up a 4-page hunter sheet and we'll take a look at some of the skills. This hunter sheet is taken from MrGoneRockSolidShells.com. They're really good sheets, very useful. Manipulation plus intimidation. Let's just double check this in relation to some other endowments. Cat, please. Intelligence. So in the case of using benediction rituals, you add your endowment rating. Mm. hmm So what we're going to throw together for this is manipulation plus intimidation plus endowment. Um, these need um, roll conditions, so dramatic failure, cannot use this power for a day. Failure, the power fails. Success, you lock down a single innate or activated power that you know of for a scene. This could be anything. So we're fighting deviants, so it could be one of their variations. If you had hunters that specialized in werewolves and saw werewolves as experimentation, this could be the sort of thing that um, uh, they use to lock out werewolf healing, for example. These sorts of supernatural um, powers, resolve plus supernatural advantage, SA. Natural advantage. Um, exceptional success. You lock down 2 supernatural abilities of the target. So this could be anything. This could be locking down the supernatural healing of a werewolf, whilst also locking down their a single form of the werewolf. You may not want them to be able to escape in their wolf form, or if they're a deviant, you may lock down a variation and their what is it? I think it's their form, their deviant form. That is a simple but powerful endowment that can be thrown around. We need to outline that this is an instant action. Because it's so powerful, it's probably not a effect of 2, writing it out. It's probably an effect of 3. So we want to add a cost to this, simply because it is so powerful. 1 willpower. And we're going to put in a caveat on this. You can only have 1 instance of this power activated. So that should actually stop hunters just chaining this power as their instant actions until you rob someone of all access to their um, supernatural template. Pretty simple. Um, we'll do another one. We've got time. So that is much more focused on cursing someone. What about blessing someone? Let's. We'll boot up the marvelous and glorious What Codex? Codex of Darkness. This beautiful little wiki saves my backside more times than I would like to mention, and to get some idea of how far we want to push these powers, we're going to draw ideas from Fate, the Fate School of Effects. Um, Probably no further than Fate 3. After that, at Fate 4, you really start breaking the world. Here's a good one to transfer. Lucky number. So this is effective 1. You can open any door in one try. And this can be multiple scenes. So it's a mechanical value of +2. And we're going to put in a backlash for this. So costs specific circumstances. Speaking a passphrase. And it brings about a minor drawback. This minor drawback is going to be a -2 on all stealth rolls whilst activated. So putting this into the style, the hunter knows a simple blessing that they can draw upon at any moment. Give themselves edge. Then pray. With the right substandard tools. Can escape from any location. So we need a cost. I'll just change that to backlash. Action and effect. -2 on all stealth rolls whilst this power is active. Action. Instant. Lasts. Let's go 2 scenes. That's particularly powerful normally. Effect. The hunter speaks a passphrase they know, blessing themselves to be able to escape, to open any locked door in one try. The hunter still needs the basic tools. Hairpin for a tumbler lock, or a hand print not theirs for a biometric lock. Biometric lock. But the hunter can open any door that may be locked to them. There we go. That's 2 simple endowments for this hunter organization. One that plays very much into their cursing pardon me, mode, and one plays into their lucky mode. Both of these make the Bellefonte conspiracy kind of powerful, but very selectively powerful. Those powers aren't actually going to stop a determined changeling, or a focused werewolf pack, or even a group of deviants who are coming after them. However, what they are going to do is give the hunters an edge in getting their prey. And that is the main thing about Hunter. That is the goal of Hunter, to simply build and develop a means of uh, getting the edge on their target. Making sure that their target can't do the things that they want to do. Making sure that the target falls into a trap or something like that. Yeah, simple powers, but the sorts of things that are very easy to build with Hunter 2E. They lay everything out for you. They give very specific values um, and serious uh, effects thereof. And if you look at some of the other um, endowments, like benedictions, you can see that. These are all rituals, and you can map them to the cost and effect um, style that they've put together. So, yeah, thank you very much for joining me today. That's going to be all that we have time for. Because I need to go for a walk, clear my lungs, and do all that sort of stuff. Thank you very much for joining me. For those of you that did. Um, if you're looking for any further um, content, I believe we've got something popping up in the next hour. Give me a second. Yes, we've got Mage Neon Gore, Mage the Ascension at 8 p.m. EDT or 10 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So yeah, and if you want to see Hunter the Vigil in action, tune into the Onyx Path for Black Royal Regatta Decennium at 9 p.m. EDT. Thank you all very much for being here. Thank you for participating, and I'll see you around. Bye.